Okay, let's jump right in. Today we're doing a deep dive into 2 Chronicles, specifically chapter 28.
Right. And this chapter focuses on King Ahaz. His reign was, well, a really tough and pivotal moment for the kingdom of Judah.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack the events, the choices he made, and the outcomes described here. Really try to understand what went down and why it's significant.
It's a chapter that doesn't pull punches.
Yeah.
It really lays bare the consequences when leadership goes wrong and how that affects a whole nation.
So Ahaz, he starts young, right? Becomes king at 20.
Yep, just 20 years old, and he reigns for 16 years from Jerusalem. But the text immediately sets up let's say, a critical contrast.
It really does. It compares him directly to David, his ancestor, who's kind of the gold standard in this history.
Exactly, and it's blunt. It says, Ahaz did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. That's not just an observation, it's a fundamental judgment on his entire reign right from the start.
And this wasn't like a minor slip-up. The source makes it clear this was a deliberate turn.
Oh, completely deliberate. It says he walked in the ways of the kings of Israel. And for anyone familiar with the context, the Northern Kingdom, that's a huge red flag.
Because Israel was known for idolatry, especially Baal worship.
Precisely. And Ahaz didn't just tolerate it, he actively embraced it. The text says he made cast idols for worshiping the Baals. He's leading the charge here.
And then it gets, well, significantly darker, disturbing, really.
Yeah, the source details practices it calls detestable. It gets specific.
Like sacrificing in the valley of Ben Hinnom.
Yes, that valley later becomes infamous. And the most shocking part, it explicitly says he sacrificed his own sons in the fire.
Wow, that's just horrific. Child sacrifice.
It is. It shows how completely he broke from the Lord's commands, adopting the worst practices of the surrounding nations. It's a total rejection.
And it wasn't just these extreme acts, right? He basically mainstreamed idolatry.
Spread it everywhere. Sacrificing and burning incense on the high places, hilltops, under every spreading tree, all the spots associated with pagan worship that were supposed to be off limits. He systematically replaced the worship of the Lord across Judah.
So the picture's clear. A king leading the nation away from its core identity, and the text is just as clear about what happens next.
Absolutely. It draws a direct line. The Lord humbled Judah because of Ahaz. It says God handed him over to the king of Aram.
No ambiguity there.
None. The reason given, Ahaz promoted wickedness and was most unfaithful. The troubles aren't random. They're presented as a direct result.
And the results were devastating. First, the defeat by Aram.
Exactly. They were defeated, people taken captive to Damascus. That's blow number one.
And then, ironically, he's defeated by the king of Israel, the very kingdom whose ways he was imitating.
Yeah, the irony is thick there. And the losses described are just mind-boggling.
The numbers are stark. Pekah, the Israelite king, killed 120,000 Judean soldiers.
In a single day. Can you imagine? For a kingdom the size of Judah, that's catastrophic. It's national devastation.
And it wasn't just soldiers. Key leaders were targeted too.
Right, the text names names. Zikri, an Ephraimite warrior, killed Messiah, the king's son.
A direct hit on the royal family.
And Azrikam, the palace administrator, and Elkanah, second in command. It wasn't just losing troops, it was losing the leadership structure.
On top of the deaths, there's the captivity. Huge numbers.
200,000 people. Wives, sons, daughters. The text calls them kinsmen, emphasizing they were fellow Israelites. Imagine the trauma, the families destroyed.
200,000. That's a massive number of people ripped from their homes.
And then there was the plunder. A great deal of plunder, the text says. They stripped Judah bare and took it all back to Samaria.
So Judah is left militarily broken, politically weakened, economically ruined, and suffering immense personal tragedy.
Utterly reeling. And the text circles back just to be sure we get the point.
It does, doesn't it? And hammers it home.
It reiterates, this happened because Judah had forsaken the Lord, the God of their fathers. The author's perspective is unwavering. National catastrophe follows national unfaithfulness, led by the king.
Okay, so Judah is crushed. But then the narrative shifts quite dramatically, doesn't it? Focuses on Samaria, where the victorious Israelites are returning.
It's a really unexpected twist. This prophet, Oded, shows up to meet the army coming back with all the captives and loot.
And he doesn't congratulate them.
Not at all. He starts by saying, essentially, okay, yes, the Lord was angry with Judah and gave them into your hand. He acknowledges God's part in their victory.
But then comes the but.
A big one. He condemns them fiercely, saying their slaughter was done in a rage that reaches to heaven. He's saying, you went way too far. Your violence was excessive, driven by pure rage, and God sees it.
And he calls them out on the captives they plan to enslave.
Directly. He asks them, basically, you think Judah sinned? Look in the mirror. Aren't you also guilty of sins against the Lord? He confronts their hypocrisy, pointing out Israel's own long history of messing up.
Ouch. And he gives them a
A
command.
very clear command and a stark warning. Send back your fellow countrymen, for the Lord's fierce anger rests on you. He tells them their actions are about to bring God's judgment down on them.
Wow. So how does this victorious army react to being chewed out like that?
Well, before the army reacts, something else happens. Some of the Ephraimite leaders themselves, the text names 4 of them, they step up.
They intercept the army.
Yes, they confront the soldiers, backing up Oded's message. They say, you cannot bring these prisoners here. It will make us guilty before the Lord, adding to our own sin and guilt. They recognize the danger they're in themselves.
They saw it as compounding their own problems.
Exactly. They knew bringing those captives in and slaving their kinsmen could be the thing that tipped the scales and brought judgment on Israel.
And the soldiers, what did they do? This is usually where things go badly in these stories.
It's truly amazing. The soldiers actually listened. They gave up the prisoners and plunder, right there, in front of the leaders and everyone else. They relinquished their spoils of war based on this moral and spiritual appeal.
That's incredible. They just handed them over.
Handed them over, but it gets even better. The story doesn't stop there.
What else happens?
Specific men were then assigned to care for the prisoners. And get this, they used the plunder, the stuff taken from Judah, to help them.
No way.
Yes. They clothed the naked, gave them clothes, sandals, food, drink, even healing balm for their wounds. They put the weak ones on donkeys.
So real practical care.
Absolutely. And then they didn't just release them. They escorted them back home, took them all the way to Jericho, the city of palms, made sure they got back to their people safely, and then returned to Samaria.
That's an astonishing act of mercy, especially given the context.
It really is. A moment of compassion cutting right through the brutality of war and judgment. It's a stark contrast to Ahaz.
Okay, so while this unexpected mercy is playing out up north, back in Jerusalem, Ahaz is dealing with the fight out of these defeats. What's his move?
Does he learn anything? Does he turn back? Sadly, no. His reaction is, well, typical for him, it seems. He looks for help, but not from the Lord.
He turns to Assyria, Tiglath-Pileser.
Exactly, the big regional power. He tries to make a deal, sends tribute, even raiding the temple and palace treasuries to pay them off.
And did it work? Did Assyria help?
The text is brutally concise. It gave him trouble instead of help. The alliance was useless, maybe even made things worse, possibly by dragging Judah into Assyria's conflicts or demands.
So while he's focused on this failed foreign policy, his other enemies are still attacking.
Yep, the Edomites attack again, take more prisoners, and the Philistines raid towns in the western foothills and the south, the Negev, capturing and occupying territory. Judah's just getting squeezed.
And again, the narrative links this back
to Ahaz. The Lord had humbled Judah because of Ahaz, for he had promoted wickedness and had been most unfaithful. The pressure keeps mounting, and the text insists it's because of his choices.
So how does Ahaz respond to this relentless pressure, this ongoing failure? Does this finally break him or humble him?
It's maybe the most revealing and tragic part. The source says, in his time of trouble, King Ahaz became even more unfaithful to the Lord.
More unfaithful? How is that even possible?
Instead of humbling him, the crisis hardened him. It pushed him further away. He doubled down.
And he comes up with this really twisted logic for it all.
It's bizarre. He looks at the Arameans, who beat him earlier, and thinks, well, their gods must be strong. They helped them win.
So he decides to worship them.
Yeah. I will sacrifice to them, so they will help me. It's pure pragmatism based on perceived power, completely divorced from covenant or faithfulness. He's trying to appease the gods of his enemies, hoping they'll switch sides.
A desperate move, and the text says.
It was his downfall. Those very gods were his downfall and the downfall of all Israel, meaning Judah here. The thing he turned to for help destroyed him.
And his final acts, they're like a total shutdown of legitimate worship.
It's the end game of his apostasy. He takes the temple furnishings away, maybe sells them, maybe just desecrates them, and then the ultimate act, he shut the doors of the Lord's temple.
Locked it up, forbade worship.
Completely shut it down. Blocked access to the very heart of Judah's religious identity.
And replaced it with what?
Pagan altars. Everywhere. At every single street corner in Jerusalem, the text says, and not just Jerusalem. In every town in Judah, he built high places to burn sacrifices to other gods. A systematic kingdom-wide replacement program.
Just flooding the kingdom with idolatry.
Total saturation. And the final verdict from the source on this. He provoked the Lord, the God of his fathers, to anger, actively, deliberately provoked him.
The chapter then wraps up his reign, mentioning other records and his death.
Right, he dies, he's buried in Jerusalem. But there's that final telling detail.
He wasn't put in the royal tombs.
Exactly. Not placed in the tombs of the kings of Israel, the main royal cemetery. Even in death, there's this distinction marking his unfaithful reign, a final judgment.
And his son, Hezekiah, takes over.
Which sets the stage for the next chapter, because Hezekiah goes in the complete opposite direction.
So looking back at this whole chapter, this deep dive, it's pretty intense. We see the severe consequences linked to a leader's unfaithfulness, the ripple effect on the whole nation.
Yeah, the devastation is palpable. But then you have that counterpoint, that surprising moment of mercy from the Israelites in Samaria. It adds such a fascinating layer.
It really does. It makes you think, doesn't it? What does this ancient story tell us about leadership today, about how choices at the top impact everyone?
And about how people react under pressure. Ahaz just kept digging the hole deeper. What does that show us about how crisis can either break us or sometimes clarify our core beliefs? Where do we turn?
Do we double down on what's failing, like Ahaz, or do we look elsewhere? And where do we find inspiration? Maybe in those unexpected moments, like the Ephraimite leaders choosing mercy.
It definitely leaves you considering how we respond when things fall apart, where we seek help, and maybe, just maybe, how compassion can show up even when it seems least likely. A lot to chew on there.